All right, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 1:02 p.m. Karen, if you can go ahead and do the roll.
Yep. Person Becerra.
Here.
Dr. Cynthia Ricci.
Here.
Elsa Batista.
Here.
Tiffany Cowett. Jennifer Delaney, excuse me.
I'm
I see
present. This is Tiffany. My mic wouldn't unmute. I'm here.
Okay,
Okay, perfect.
thank you. Sarah Laura Fitzsimons.
Present.
Jenny Graves.
Here.
Margaret Gustafson.
Here.
Dr. Mel Horton.
Here.
Thank you. Hamish McPhail.
Here.
Thank you. Sharon Marmon.
Here.
Patrice McCarthy.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Catherine Rowe. She is here. Dr. Rowe, I see you are here. Bob Sartoris. Thank you. Cynthia Sonia Moyano.
Present.
Thank you. All set,
Great.
Madam Chair.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, we are on to review and approval of minutes. We have two sets of minutes to approve, the regular meeting from October 20th, as well as the special meeting from the 27th. Are there any adjustments that need to be made to either one of those minutes?
I just had a
Shannon.
question. I just had a question for a meeting like the special meeting where I only joined for a half hour of it. Is it possible to, I mean, maybe that's too hard to keep track of, but like some of the votes I just wasn't even there for. So it's hard to know who was part of votes and who wasn't based on when people came and left the meeting. So didn't know if I should approve those minutes since I was only there for about a half hour of it.
All right, thank you. That's a good question for Karen. Thoughts?
You can abstain from voting on those minutes if you're not comfortable. That would be fine.
Okay. Is it possible to have like a note when a board member arrives late or leaves early in the minutes?
Sure. Going forward.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks.
Kristen?
Yeah, since we take it as roll call votes anyways, Shannon, would it make sense, if we're taking a roll call vote to just say like who had voted in which way? So then it would be clear that like you didn't vote on this thing.
Yeah, I don't think all of those votes were roll call votes, if I remember correctly. But yeah, if they're roll call votes, it's not an issue, but I don't know that that was across the board.
So at the special meeting, they were all roll call votes, and the ones that were unanimous, just to kind of save space, we just had listed as unanimous. And the ones that were not unanimous, we kind of had it listed out for those. But I think maybe moving forward, just kind of making note when folks leave, so that we could just add that as like a note to the agenda would be appropriate. All right. Is there any other discussion about the minutes? All right. Seeing none, they are approved by general consensus. Oh, sorry. Bob, I think your microphone is on. There we go. Thank you. All right, so going into public participation and comment. This is a time where we all received the public participation as listed on the agenda. Public participation for virtual meetings need to be in 24 hours or the Friday before a Monday meeting, for example, and then distributed to the board as part of and gets saved as part of the public record. Whereas in-person meetings, they would be there in person providing public participation during that time. So we all received the two public participation, which was from, let's see, public testimony that we received in writing was from Robin Moore and from Chris Trombley. Robin Moore provided just kind of an overview some suggestions and concerns about ensuring that there was enough professional development related to math, and a possible priority of having math specialists, much like the literacy specialists or literacy coaches. Again, that's part of the public record, and all the board members received that for greater detail. And Chris Trombley's testimony echoes the testimony that we also heard at our in-person meeting of not approving the waivers that are currently on the agenda. And again, all the board members received that for deeper consideration and in their work. All right, next on our agenda is announcements, administrative announcements by Karen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to remind everyone that if you have things that you would like to have on the agenda, presentations, proposals, etc., please submit them within the 10 days that are required by the bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and then in terms of board business for myself, there was a question on, we had initially asked if Emma could do some backwards planning for us or mapping for us, and Emma being the legal counsel that was provided to assist us in our regulation work. What we've learned is that Emma's work is specific to regulations work and providing us with like a baseline to work from, and any legislative fixes that come outside of that. So that work of mapping wouldn't be within the scope that she was contracted for by the 4 organizations involved, or agreed upon by the 4 organizations involved, where Luke's scope has pretty much anything that that myself and Karen and Dr. Ritchie decide on that work moving forward in terms of assisting us facilitate meetings, particularly the in-person meetings that we're going to be hoping to have soon, which is one of our agenda items. And now we are planning and mapping and doing that work that we wanted Emma to do, but we're doing it with Luke, and Sepra will possibly be joining that conversation as well for the December meeting. Then we go into updates. So the updates are for the Education Committee. It's a standing kind of update. We had sent out a request to have a meeting on November 4th due to the special session, which ended on November 14th. We believe our legislators are, we're very tied up at that time. So we'll be following up to have an additional meeting with them in the coming week or two. But we wanted to give them the grace of, it was a busy time. There was a lot of things on that special session that were really important that had to be gotten to. So that part is there. And then the LPCD update, it was a great meeting. I want to thank our SDE helpers here, Julianne and Lauren and Kaylin, and the Deputy Commissioner, Cynthia Sonia-Mayano, for attending that along with myself and Karen. There was lots of great questions and discussions around it. Everything that was on their agenda, they approved to move forward to SBE. So those things will go on to the State Board of Education's agenda for the December meeting. And then once that's approved there, it will move on to the regulations process and or the legislative process in there. But they were very impressed with the significant amount of work that we have completed so far and the lift that was in there. I provided an email update to the board on that as well, and wanted to thank everybody who was involved in helping to answer any questions that the Legislative Policy Development Committee for the State Board of Education had for us. So thank you all for your hard work and the lift that was involved in the many regulations that we put through for them, as well as the legislative language that we had for them. It was a great meeting and very encouraging and hopeful of the work that we're going to continue to do. So thank you all so much. Then the regulations ad hoc update. So they're continuing to meet bi-weekly. So this coming Friday will be their next meeting. It's going to be an extended meeting time from 2:45 to 4:30 because there's a big batch that Kristen has coming through for the regulations group to deliberate on. So we're looking forward to that work. Anyone who would like to attend that meeting is more than welcome to attend that meeting, and that information will go out later this week. I didn't want to send it out before this board meeting because I didn't want it to confuse with the materials drop that we had for this meeting and all those things. So I wanted to make sure that there was a little bit of separation there and the number of emails and information that was going out. So then Kristen actually has an organizer to show you just the level of work that has been done so far. It's a great visual. So Karen, if you could put up the regulations organizer.
Sure.
Right. And while Karen is working on that, I can start to explain what this sunset regulation tracker is all about. As you know, Public Act 2441 set to sunset a large number of regulations, everything from EPP approval to Code of Professional Responsibilities to some of the initial certification regulations. And for a lot of these, we really needed to just do our due diligence and make sure either we were bringing the language up to date, that we we're making sure it was still necessary. Some of them, we decided that it would be better to just reinstate as written, like the application procedures or whether or not applicants should be paying an application fee. So what you see here on the left is the section within the regulations that was repealed, the subject of that regulation, notes of what we decided to do with it. So did we, for instance, for the Code of Professional Responsibility for Teachers, our board partnered with Cactopus and they revised the Code of Professional Responsibility, submitted it to us, which we then approved. So that particular regulation did not go through the ad hoc committee for regulations as it was done by the Cactopus group. It went straight to our board where it was approved and went through the policy committee where it was approved. Many of the other regulations are going through the ad hoc committee. So you'll see them have like the green under that column means it's already been through that committee, then to the board, then to the policy committee. And if we had to put a few more check boxes on here, the next column over, all the way on the right would be, did it get through SBE? Does it go through the regulations process, which could take a very long time? So anything in blue is things where we have draft language that's either going to be reviewed by the ad hoc committee or the board as a whole if it's already left committee. So if you continue to scroll down, you'll see that there's a large amount of these sunset regulations that we've already, I know, it's hard. There's so many tabs.
A bunch.
I know. Good. Now, sometimes you'll see like a little cross off at policy committee. If something we felt like should just be allowed to sunset, it was already decided to be sunset by the legislature, but it doesn't need to be reinstated or revised, and it's just going to be allowed to sunset. Our board approves that, but then it doesn't go to the policy committee because it's already been sunset. There's no further action necessary. It doesn't need to go back through the regulations process, and so it doesn't need to go to the State Board of Education or their policy committee. Okay. So as you continue to scroll down, you're going to start to see a few that are in italics. The few that are in italics were items that we found needed to be reviewed or revised, not because they were necessarily sunset, but because other language in the Public Act made them either irrelevant or need to change. So for instance, I don't know if we can see one on the screen right now that fits this category. But I guess I can talk about the three that are on the screen that are italicized. The work with the early childhood group. So the validity for early childhood, initial cert for early childhood, those are in italics because they weren't actually sunset in the Public Act, but they needed to be revised because the grade range changed and there was birth to three work that was done through other organizations. So notice that didn't go through the ad hoc committee, that went straight to the board where we've seen and approved it already. Now, as we get further down, you'll start to see more that we haven't gotten to yet. It's not that we don't have documents for them yet. It's that either they're drafted and the ad hoc committee hasn't received them yet, so they're just in draft form. Some of these are waiting for decisions from our full board in order to see like what pathway we go, because that depends on how the regulations get written. And all the way at the end, if we keep going, you'll see a large number that are italics And these are mostly the provisional certification language that need to be repealed as a result of the Public Act making it a two-tier certification system and getting rid of provisional certs. So that's it. That is our progress on all the different regulations that have been sunset by the Public Act and new ones that we have found that are either became irrelevant or needed to be updated as a result of the Public Act.
Perfect. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions about this?
I do. How does this, thank you for doing this, by the way, Kristen. It helps for those of us who are linear thinkers. So how does this play into an agenda item that's coming up with the program approval CPRL team and the EPPs getting together? I would assume, because I saw dates on some of this, I would assume that that work is going to inform some of this. I just wanted to make sure we give that group time to convene and talk and make some recommendations to the board without the board moving forward on those things.
Sure. We're going to actually be talking about that as part of our agenda for projects, the program approvals section. So that's going to be coming up next. So it's a great lead into. So thank you, Mel, for that conversation there. So the program approval, so we'll just go right into projects then, if that's, unless somebody has a different question for Kristen, otherwise I'll go right into the program approval update.
Oh,
Kristen,
and if
go
I
ahead.
could just add, I actually didn't include the three EPP, the three regulations that involve EPP approval. I didn't include in this tracker because the work is being done somewhere that's not in the ad hoc committee. So if you scroll all the way up to the very top, you'll notice it starts at 401. So it starts with the section for educator certificates, permits, and authorizations. And I actually left the EPP ones off of this organizer. I could add it in the future though.
Can you speak more to what you mean by that? Then are you, and just correct me if I'm wrong. So, for example, 404 includes EPPs and everybody else. So therefore it's included, but if it's just EPP centric, you didn't put it in here. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the EPP approval of programs is actually, it's like in a different section of the regulations. So where it starts the section for certificates, permits, and authorizations starts at 400, but then the approval for Connecticut EPP programs starts at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it was just in a different section, so I didn't include it in this tracker.
Okay, gotcha.
All right, thank you. All right, any other questions? Yes, I think that this visual speaks to the amount of work that has been done thus far. And, we appreciate the work of, Kristen, Emma, the regulations ad hoc and all the members of the ad hoc, as well as the board having those rich discussions around this work and moving it forward to LPCD and the State Board of Education. In terms of projects, program approval. So that is it's a big, large chunk program approval regulations. So the regulations group, since they handle regulations, are going to be working, the regulations group voted to have CPRL and the 3 EPPs from our board. Additional EPP representation from outside of the board that Mel, Jen Delaney, and Catherine Rowe would bring into the conversation, as well as our SDE consultants that we have here, and any professional organizations like we heard in public participation previously to help with this work. The intent is that they will be having meetings and discussing and coming up with ideas to present to the regulations group and then the board. And as part of that work, if we later approve one of the calendar proposals, we envision that some of that additional work and board input might happen in an AM session of a full day board meeting to allow some kind of reimagining, revision, providing some feedback from the entire board on that work as well. But that will be part of that process that Mel was asking about earlier. And we're thinking or anticipating that that will happen between now and the December meeting with CPRL and SDE. And then at that December meeting, we would also have additional conversations to help that group with any work as well, and providing some ideas as part of that. Dr. Rowe?
Thanks, Jennifer. I just wanted to kind of provide some, shed some light on the conversation with CPRL when we talk about representation, EPP representation. I did meet with CPRL on Friday. We met for about an hour and a half, and I did recommend not specific EPPs. I recommended that the 13 public and privates from AACTE be part of that discussion, and invited CPRL to have a discussion. I also recommended focus groups of the same network. So I just wanted to let everyone know on the call and for the minutes that I did recommend that we open it up to all the EPPs so we can have EPP voice.
Thank you, Catherine. Great. They are well on their way, deciding when they're going to meet and starting to have those conversations, which is great to hear. Thank you, Catherine. All right, if we move forward, we also have, let me see, Birth to Grade 3 endorsement standards and guidelines update. So Paige did reach out, and she reached out to Tong from CPRL. They'll be working on that continuing work as the Birth to Grade 3 moves through SBE and then on to regulations in that process. They'll be meeting to have those conversations. And then the ODRD update, the Office of Dyslexia and Reading Disabilities, gave us a wonderful presentation. I believe they're working on regulations specific to 4 certs that would need to specify that they must do student teaching, wouldn't be able to DSAP with the work around that for their competencies. They must be observed during their student teaching. For 2 of the certs, they must pass the foundations of reading. I think ODRD is tasked with verifying that this was done. And I think this is language from previous legislation that kind of created ODRD and the work that they have to do around that work. So we might need to add that to the EPP regs. So that's on the radar. And include like 12 clock hours of being able to identify and help students with dyslexia. It's specific to 4, I believe, certifications: the Early Childhood Integrated, Reading Specialist, Reading Consultant, and Comprehensive Special Education. So it's specific to those kind of programs, but they are working with that. And I think that they had reached out to Kristen on the regs group to kind of present some regulations or materials or have those discussions so that it can kind of be pondered and brought in, as well as for CPRL to be aware as part of that EPP work on program approval. All right, and then we have, I think that's it for the updates. So now we get to the fun stuff, the action items. So let's start off with our bylaws amendment for alternates. So it's up on the screen. Could you just make that a little bit bigger on the screen, Karen? Magnify it with the magnifying glass on the bottom right, I think it is. Perfect. All right, is that good, or does anyone need it any bigger? That's good. I see Tiffany nodding her head. All right. So the proposed amendment, the board shall establish alternate members for each of the 16 board members. Each appointing organization's leadership shall appoint an alternate for its voting member on the board. The alternate may vote only in the absence of the voting member. The proposed amendment shall be provided to the board in accordance with Section 3 amendments of the bylaws. Related amendments as voting by proxy shall be permitted only in the absence of the voting member when the designated alternate may vote on their behalf. This came out of a couple of conversations. Patricia McCarthy brought this up a couple of months back as a question, and President Windish actually asked about it as well, just in case the representative, like Mel, for example, or another representative couldn't be available, that they'd be able to come on board and help with that to ensure that we have quorum and that the work moves forward. So that's the amendment to our bylaws. I would cater a motion to accept it so we can open it up to discussion.
So moved.
All right,
Patrice.
so moved. I think it was Patrice. Thank you, Patrice. Do we have a second?
Second, Tiffany.
Second, Tiffany, thank you. Is there any discussion around this? All right, Kristen, go ahead.
So I think this is a really great idea. I do kind of want to see how it fits in with the rest of the bylaws to make sure that this is the right section to put it in. I guess I had a question for Karen or or if Emma were here, because I just wonder if we have a alternate member, do the alternate members count towards a quorum? So let's say we had this program approval meeting and it's got CPRL, it's got the 12 EPPs from AACTE, you know, we have the 3 members from our board. You know, if any of the alternates were at that meeting, would that count as more than a quorum? I just don't know and I'm not familiar.
It will not. The alternates will only be authorized to vote in the absence of the appointed member that's from their organization. So they can attend. Alternates may attend, but they only vote in the absence of the appointed member.
I meant more along the lines of, let's say we're having a meeting that's not a board meeting. If there was another meeting where there was you had all 3 EPPs and maybe the 3 alternate EPPs. So now does that count as 6 board members at this meeting? And then would it need to like do what it needs to do to obey the Open Meetings Act?
Yes, that would be a public meeting if you have a quorum. If you have a quorum. So for this board, you need 9 members at least to have a quorum. So if you have 9 members, then that meeting has to be publicly noticed.
Thank you. Sarah, I'm sorry, Hamish, and then Sarah.
No, that was really helpful because I think what I'm hearing from that response is that if, say, the Increasing Educator Diversity Oversight Council has myself as a representative and then the person behind me as the alternate, if we're talking to each other and a bunch of other people who are also members and alternates, it's only the votes, the number of votes? Like there's only one person representing that spot on a vote, correct, Karen? So therefore,
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
that's my question too. That's really helpful, and I appreciate this actually not even because of the bylaw, but because of what it does on behalf of the organizations that you represent and the voices and bringing people up to speed on the work that we're doing. I think it's actually really helpful to communicate that and keep people change in and out of roles all the time, and so I think it's important to have continuity. And so it just means that a multitude of people are looking at this and interested in it. So I appreciate the bylaw change, and I'll be voting yes.
Thank you. Sarah?
I think I'm asking the same question that Hamish did. It's really in the language, the alternate may vote only in the absence of the voting member. So each organization still only gets 1 vote.
Correct.
Thank you.
And I will tell you, when I was on the council in the past, I was actually the alternate initially for the primary for the Teacher of the Year Council. And then the primary had other responsibilities. So I became the primary and she became the alternate. And I voted, not really voted because the council, it was more discussions and feedback that we provided at that time. But it worked out well, especially if people couldn't always attend, and it allowed, other voices in the room. So for example, if you were on an ad hoc or group and you felt like maybe your alternate would be, able to be at those meetings more flexibly than yourself, there could be those conversations that you had internally within that, and then, coming to the board meetings. So are there any other questions to this or suggestions? All right, seeing none, we will move it to a vote. So we will do a quick roll call vote, and I will call the roll. Jen Rodriguez, yes. Cynthia Ritchie?
Yes.
Kristen Besega?
Yes.
Elsa Batista?
Yes.
Tiffany Coette?
Yes.
Jen Delaney?
Yes.
Sarah Fitzsimons?
Yes.
Jenny Graves?
Yes.
Margaret Gustafson,
Yes.
Mel Horton,
Yes.
Hamish McPhail,
Yes.
Shannon Merriman,
Yes.
Patrice McCarthy,
Yes.
Catherine Rowe,
Yes.
Bob Satoris. I think he was on, right?
He was,
Okay.
either I don't see him.
Okay, so that would be a note, right? So Cynthia Soni Moyano,
Yes.
perfect. So the motion carries. And what we'll do is we'll send out notification to the leadership of each organization. We already have leadership of each organization in some cases, and others we don't. So we'll go ahead and send that out in general for that discussion in case anyone needs an alternate. And to let us know, because what we can do is include them in the mailings of information, just kind of keep them up to speed as we go. All right, well done. Next on our action item is B, proposal for meeting and calendar adjustment to an in-person and full day. Okay, so this is the proposal to change our December meeting from 1 to 4 o'clock, being from 9 until 4 p.m. A full day meeting in person. Karen has been working hard in anticipation to gather a place for us. The morning would function in a very collaborative open session around topics of our statutory obligations, as well as kind of reimagining, re-envisioning things like education preparation programs. It would be facilitated between Dr. Ritchie, myself, and Luke for the morning session and discussion. We would have lunch there, which would be provided. And then the afternoon would be a regular board meeting, business as usual kind of activities for the afternoon. This would be a great opportunity for us to kind of, one, get to know each other, work more collaboratively and freely in in-person groupings. As part of the council, we did this every once in a while. Most of our meetings were half a day, but every once in a while we would have a full day meeting that would be very similar to this. So what we're looking for at this time is to change the December meeting, same date, I believe, December 8th, to a full day in person with a 9 to 11 a.m. session of collaborative work, lunch with the board provided, and then afternoon regular business meeting or regular board meeting for the afternoon. And then if you scroll down a bit, Karen, I believe the March one is in there as well. So a little while back, we asked for some feedback on a full day in-person retreat meeting, kind of like the similar idea, but it would be a fully retreat meeting, opportunities for us to come around, have discussions, get to know the board. It's not lost on me that tomorrow is our one year anniversary of the board meeting each other and getting started. And we never had that opportunity to kind of have a retreat and, kind of get to know each other and do some, refocusing kind of work around the board. So it was suggested that we do a retreat in March. Tentatively, our normal board meeting would be March 9th, but that might have to be moved depending on where we find a facility to have this sort of meeting. So it might change slightly, but we'd like to do it as a full day in-person board retreat for that day as well. So I would cater a motion to accept these changes for December and March.
So moved, Patrice.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
A
Second.
Margaret.
Oh, we got lots of seconds. I think Shannon, I think it was Cynthia I heard in there, Margaret.
Dr. Ritchie, yeah.
Yeah, so we got lots of seconds. Thank you. Is there any discussion around this? All right, I see Sarah's hand. Sarah, go ahead.
This would be a great time to have an alternate because I already have a conflict in the morning on the 8th. I wouldn't be able to attend the morning. I only had the afternoon booked and I can't change my morning commitment.
Sure. That makes sense. Thank you. Dr. Horton?
this may be picky. So if we meet from 9 to 11 and lunch is 12 to 1 and we meet again at 1, what are we doing from 11 to 12?
Oh gosh, did I not do that timing right? Can you scroll back up a little bit?
I was just
In the
thinking that we
proposal.
can either start later or get out earlier,
Oh,
or do we need the
yeah.
9 to 12?
Well, we can also maybe just do it 10 to 12 if you guys prefer that, but we were thinking like,
Well, we might need 9 to 12. I just
3,
noticed there was
yeah.
an hour break in there.
So, are you suggesting an amendment to the 9 to 11 to make it 9 to 12?
Sure.
Thank you. Do you have a second to the amendment to that?
Besaga, I'll second.
All right, thank you. Yes, I would probably get an alternate for that also then. All right, Hamish, go ahead.
I just had a question because we voted last regular meeting about the making regular meetings available to the public in terms of filming. So I since I also know that you're trying to find a location, and it sounds like the first half is more of like a retreat special meeting type deal. So is it 2 meetings? And then because I would imagine the public probably doesn't want to see us eat lunch, but
Yeah,
maybe
no.
they do.
So
So,
great
like, explain
question.
that a little
Thank
bit.
you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So first, let's just speak to the amendment that's on there and see if we're good with that amendment. Everyone's fine with the amendment? Okay, perfect. Thank you. I believe it was seconded already, right? Was it Kristen that seconded it?
Yes.
Just want to make sure it's on the record. Thank you. So to answer that question, for the December 8th one, it's not our regular meeting. So in the morning, it's not our regular meeting. The afternoon, it is our regular meeting. So our regular meeting would be recorded in the afternoon. The morning meeting would just be ideas generating, conversation, that kind of thing. We wouldn't be taking action on anything because it wouldn't be part of a regular meeting, but it allows us to kind of calibrate our thinking around a specific topic, which will probably be the program approval process as part of that. And then the afternoon, we voted to have all of our regular meetings recorded. So the afternoon portion would be recorded. And then for the retreat in March, it would just be a retreat. I don't believe retreats are typically recorded. It's just more a time for getting to know each other as members, maybe some professional development that is available to us, as part of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense.
Okay, thank you. So are there any other questions around that? All right, so I move to have this accepted with the amendment of changing the morning session from 9 to noon, and then having lunch from noon to 1 o'clock, and then regular session in the afternoon. All in favor? We'll go do a quick roll. Remember, if you want to abstain, just say abstention. If you're against, just say against. And if you're for, just say yes or for. So Jen Rodriguez, yes. Dr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Great. Kristen Besaga?
Yes.
Elsa Batista?
Yes.
Tiffany Couette?
Yes.
Jen Delaney?
Yes.
Sarah Fitzsimons?
Yes.
Jenny Graves?
Yes.
Margaret Gustafson?
Yes.
Dr. Mel Horton?
Yes.
Hamish McPhail?
Yes.
Shannon Merriman?
Yes.
Patrice McCarthy?
Yes.
Catherine Rowe?
Yes.
Bob Satoris? Is he still not
No.
on? Okay. And Cynthia Soni Moyano?
Yes.
All right, and the motion carries and those adjustments will be made. Thank you for Karen. She worked really hard to try to find us a spot for the December 8th meeting because initially it was virtual, so there wasn't a spot held for us. So we appreciate the work behind that as well. All right, now we're moving on to C, regulations. C1, the temporary 90-day certification.
All right. So while this is coming up, I actually have to apologize to everybody because during the last board meeting, we started discussing this regulation and we had a really great discussion on it. And then when I was doing some light reading, I realized we can't make the edits that people had suggested in this document. So what this document is, the C1, this is the regulation involving the temporary 90-day certificate. This mostly has to do with ARC and Charter Oak College when people are getting their temporary 90-day certificate after they complete either one of those two alternate programs to licensure. And we had this great discussion. We had made these edits at the last board meeting. And then when I was reading the Public Act 2441, I realized we can't make these edits because the Public Act didn't repeal this regulation. It instead modified this regulation. So basically, when we write a regulation, it can't override a law, right? And so our suggestions were great, but we wouldn't be able to put them in place because they can't conflict with a law that is in place. Our regulations have to adhere to whatever the laws are. They can go into more specificity, but they can't, for instance, where it says like, we had wanted to change it to be more flexible to say an existing endorsement, but we can't necessarily do that if the law says otherwise. So I wanted to include this document so that everyone can see why I've changed the language in the proposed regulations in C2 for section 414. It's not because I don't appreciate your input. I think the changes that we would have made were excellent, but it's that when we read the Public Act, this temporary 90-day certificate language would no longer match the law. Do I have any questions on why?
I have a question, Kristen. So I assume this is what you're saying in C2 document starting on page 4,
Mhm.
that's the correct language now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Making sure.
So that when we get to C2, which is the document that has all the regulations that have left the ad hoc, that's why you see it as edited different than how we discussed it last time. So I wanted to include this document so everyone can see like why why that I had to change it afterwards, because I really liked the language we had. I thought that would be a great example of increasing flexibility. But this is another instance of where when we read really closely, we find places where we could have legislative amendments. In the future, if we wanted to make a legislative proposal to increase the flexibility of the temporary 90-day certificate, change the law, then we can go back and change the regulation to be more flexible afterwards. So it's kind of like we've now found an instance where more flexibility could be added and our board could take that action in the future. Jen, you're on mute.
Of course I am. Sorry about that. So thank you, Kristen. Should we move on to the regulation batch then?
Yes, please.
All right. We're doing C2.
Yeah, and actually, Karen, if you want, do you want me to, oh, you got it.
We can magnify it a little bit.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, is
So
that good for everybody then?
Right. So in 404, there's two assessment requirements, formally Praxis 1 and the subject area knowledge. So in, oh, someone's unmuted. But in any case, in 404, in 2016, there was a law that passed that said Praxis 1, now Praxis Core, is no longer required. It is now used as like a diagnostic for your EPPs in order to figure out like placement and see where people need remediation, especially the remediation part. So instead of saying all these different now not used tests like Concept or Connect or Praxis 1, we've kind of shortened it and made it more flexible. So now it says that each person formally admitted to an EPP shall take the Praxis Core, ACT, SAT, GRE, or other reading and writing mathematics competency exam approved by the board, or provide evidence of successful completion of 60 or more credits from a regionally accredited higher education institution. And the reasoning behind the 60 or more credits is that, let's say you have a transfer student who's coming in as a junior. Do we really want to make them go back and take the SAT or the Praxis Core or the ACT in order to figure out where they might need remediation? So that language is added to be a little bit more flexible for EPPs, where if they have a transfer student who already has these credits, they would not be required to go back and take this test just to check the box.
Dr. Horton?
Yes, I'm not sure if this is the correct procedure, but I would like to make a motion that we get rid of this requirement, as it costs candidates money, and I don't think the intention of it is actually the reality.
I think that's something that we could do in the future, but because it's in a law, and I don't know the law number off the top of my head, if you also look in the CERT alert from 2016, because it's in a law that says that each person who's admitted to an EPP shall do this, we can't really write a regulation that goes against the law. But if it helps, do you want me to find the language of that law?
Well, I guess then we're just voting on keeping it. I mean, what was the whole intent? Because if it is a law, then it's law, but you can't require a cut score. No one's using it to remediate. I mean, if we really think we're looking at those scores and then saying, oh, we're going to admit you, but we're going to tutor you in reading. I mean, it's a barrier. And I thought that was the whole point, was removing barriers.
So this might be a good area where we think about, we're adjusting the language here, and we create language around for the legislator to remove it. And I think you're giving really good ideas as to why it should be removed, right? So I think the process right now would be to amend this right now as it stands, and at the same time create new legislation that would supersede this and remove this in the future.
Okay,
So
I take your advice.
Okay, so maybe that's a good conversation that we can have with our EPPs on what the legislative language currently is in statute and how we can make a recommendation to the legislator to remove it for the many reasons that I think you and possibly Dr. Rowe wants to say as well, because I see your hand up there. So I think Kristen is taking a note on that. One of the outcomes of Emma is to help us with our regulations and draft any legislative fixes that are needed. So maybe this is a legislative fix that we want her to look into doing for us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just wonder why we look at these things multiple times then if we can't really change it.
I agree with I agree with Dr. Horton.
Yeah.
No, I agree with Dr. Horton. I mean, we're supposed to be revising the regulations. So why are we looking at a law? It's something that's in a law that we cannot change. So how, and then the other piece of that question is, if we cannot change it or we can't repeal it, right? Then how can we change the wording well, I'm not really clear on, so we can change the word, but we can't just repeal it. I'm recommending that we exclude this from the record and just expunge it completely. To Dr. Horton's point, This is not something that's used as an entrance exam. We holistically evaluate students when they come into our institution through the admissions process. And this is not something that's used to the way that it's been intended. This Praxis Core was intended to recruit underserved students that were underprepared, to provide them the remediation that they need to change diversity in the schools. That's not how it's being used. So I'm recommending that we expunge it. How do we do that? I mean, why would we change the, and Julianne put the same thing in the chat. Why can't we change the wording? But why would we change the wording? Why can't we repeal it? I'm not sure if it's law and we can't repeal it, how could we change the wording of it? I'm a little confused. Can you just provide more clarity on that?
Kristen, do you want to respond to that portion of it? And then we'll go to Hamish.
Yeah, so this wording brings the regulations up to date with the existing law. So I did find the law that I was referencing. It's Public Act 1641 from 2016, and it refers to changing the certification requirements. Now, as everyone knows, Praxis Core used to be a requirement to pass. In 2016, it made it a requirement that everyone takes the tests, but the EPPs are required by law to ensure candidates take the tests, but not required to pass them. So what we can do is have it down as our ideas for the legislative agenda of this board. So I suggest 2 branches here, right? On one hand, we write the regulations to match Public Act 1641. It includes all this additional flexibility, right? Where now they just have to take these exams. They don't actually have to pass them using ETSs or whoever else's cut scores. It also gives EPPs additional flexibility in terms of like the 60 or more credits.
Kristen, I have to
But
interrupt.
then,
I'm sorry, Kristen, there is no cut score. Like, there's no cut score. It's just taking the assessment with the intention that the EPPs will remediate based on that. I know Amish had his hand up, so I don't want to overtalk.
well, if I could finish answering the
I want to let
question you
Kristen
asked
go
me.
ahead finishing. Yeah. Kristen, go ahead and finish.
So what I was saying is before 2016, it was required that people pass it. In 2016, it no longer became a requirement, except that EPPs had to ensure candidates took the test. And it also gave like other options like SAT, ACT, GRE, etc. Right? So my suggestion was that, we have our hands kind of tied with legislation, that we can't really write a regulation that conflicts with an existing law. So we should pursue changing that law, making it part of our legislative agenda, what our board wants to put forward to the legislature, but at the same time, at least getting this into regulations so that our regulations match existing laws.
Okay, thank you. Hamish, was there something else or did she answer your question before?
That logic is helpful. I mean, presuming that we can't go beyond what the statute says currently and conflict with that, what's the furthest we can make it flexible in order to both comply with the statute as it's written, but also not be left with what we have? I think my question is kind of broader than that, which is, it passed in 2016. Why is the regulation still in conflict with the statutes? Because it's been like 9 years. So I wonder what the regulatory writing process is like, and that brings up the question about like how do we? Because I like where this is going. If we want to change it statutorily, that's great, But I also want to make sure that if things are not in alignment with the regulation, moving forward, I know that's why this board is doing a lot of what it's doing, but it just kind of begs the question as to why.
So I think the why is the regulations haven't been touched in 30 years. And that's the work of this board. And what we're finding is what you're seeing there, all that gray needs to be removed because it doesn't align to all the statute that's been done over the past almost 30 years. So we're bringing everything up to that baseline of being in alignment with statute. And then And out of these conversations, we're also coming up with other statutory ideas, like the one that Dean Horton and Catherine Rowe are presenting, that we should write legislation that kind of amends the current legislation, Public Act 1641, to remove this requirement or something along those lines. So that's why all that gray is there. That's removing all of the old stuff to align it with current statute and getting the regulations to that baseline. And out of that conversation, I think we just heard two EPPs telling us that this really doesn't work. We should be looking at legislation and fixing that. So two things can happen at the same time: update the regulations and craft legislation that we want to move forward. The tricky thing with both of those is, like I think what we saw in the last legislative session, we can put things forward, but depending on what happens in the House and in the Senate, not everything moves forward. At least with the regulations, we're at least bringing it up to being current while we work on that legislative process for modernizing everything. Dr. Rowe?
So can we be somewhat less prescriptive in articulating these specific 90 credits? Can we change the language so that a candidate has demonstrated successful completion or demonstrated? I don't know how to, I don't have a suggestion for wording. I'm just thinking that removing the 60 credits and saying that they've demonstrated successful completion of coursework, just so there's more flexibility.
And thoughts in terms of the Public Act 1641? Are we able to make that more flexible?
I think we could. Is there language that people would like to make an amendment to, or a way that they would like to be amended?
I see Margaret's hand up. Go ahead, Margaret, and then we'll go to Dr. Horton.
So I just want to go back to this because in the ad hoc meeting where we discussed this, we did have a lengthy discussion about the original intent being remediation, what it feels like now, and kind of put that to bed as a separate issue. And then we were talking about the large number of people who transfer into a program. And so trying to still meet the law while recognizing that if they're coming to you from another college, that there's already evidence of something under their belt. And then the 60 credits or more was in alignment to, and someone will correct me because I'm sure I will not get this right, the paraprofessionals and their evidence. So trying to align in a way, so not as to diminish one, but still keep the intent and the integrity of everything in place. I don't know if that helps, but that is a little bit of the really meaty conversation that we had in the ad hoc meeting.
Thank you, Margaret. Mel, go ahead.
So in all my meetings, in all my years of working with Praxis Core, my understanding is it's the reading, writing, math test is similar to a 10th grade level test. So what if we change the language to or provide evidence of successful high school graduation? So Praxis Core or high school transcript.
Wasn't there a part of the conversation with the regulations group, just that you just sparked a memory for me, sorry, Dr. Horton, around to be admitted to an ed prep program, or not an ed prep, but an undergrad program before you even apply for an ed prep program? That's part of the work, right? They have to submit their transcripts, they have to submit, successful completion, whether it's a GED or full traditional route through high school. So is that already done? Or am I
Well, I was just
remembering
trying to get
incorrectly?
around, the language. So
Gotcha.
if we can't say, get rid of the test, okay, either take Praxis Core, SAT, GRE, or provide a high school transcript that you graduated from high school. Then we're getting around the language of you must take Praxis Core or ACT or SAT or GRE. And then you wouldn't have to change the law. Because it took out the part about, it gave them an option of just having a high school degree, which if you're admitted to a university, we assume you can read, write, and do math at a 10th grade level, or you wouldn't be coming.
Okay, so I
Kristen?
have something that might help. So the way that this public act was written, I put the language that's relevant in the chat, and it kind of puts off saying the details of the testing. It says that not later than January 2017, the state board shall adopt guidelines for the use of scores in reading, writing, and mathematics competency, and that they'll publish these guidelines. Well, these guidelines are the cert alert. So the law itself doesn't say, take the test. The law says follow the guidelines. So then we go and we find the cert alert from 2016, 2017. And of course, now I can't find it. Right. And that is how the state board set like the testing guidelines. So it might actually not need to go all, oh, thank you. Lauren, is this it? Yes, this is it. Okay. So then in the cert alert is like the details of what the state board decided to do. So what if instead, because it just needs to be, it's from the state board, right? Unless Julianne found something else that would be useful here. Julianne, what section did you find?
I went to CGA to pull up the actual PA 1641, and this is the language that was each person formally admitted to an approved teacher preparation program shall take the student reading writing competency exam prescribed and administered under the direction of the state board. That's basically what it says. So that's because we had the option and by the state board, we said, oh, it's going to be either Praxis Core or it's going to be SAT, So the language is basically says they shall take a competency exam, whether it's the Praxis 1 exam or the SAT exam or the GRE exam. The language in the statute says they have to take an exam. So you have to change the statute to get rid of it completely.
Right. So I think we still have to go
Thank
both
you.
approaches, which would be a legislative change and a regulations change in both paths.
Kristen,
Okay.
can we make the entire language less prescriptive, and can we say where they have met the entrance criteria for the institution, right? So that means they have a high school or some kind of equivalence. They may come in with credits. They're going to have a transcript. They're going to have letters of recommendation. There's a whole process that institutions ask about candidates, right? They have to have a certain GPA. So can't we just use that kind of language where they are going to demonstrate that they've met the entrance criteria of the institution? Then we have a placeholder there until it can be built at a later date.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe. I mean, the way it reads right now, it says each person formally admitted to a State Board of Education approved teacher preparation program shall take the state reading, writing, and math competency examination prescribed and administered under the direction of the State Board of Education. Can we change that language to like have that be in there? And then the guidance then comes from the state Board of Education on what that might be while we pursue a legislative fix.
And you still have an assessment
I
that's going to
think-
cost our candidates money that for something that they don't, that really doesn't serve them to meet the certification requirements.
Right. But many,
I have-
many
Kristen,
candidates do actually.
Kristen, go ahead.
Yeah, so many candidates do actually have the SAT if they went to undergraduate. But I like the idea of making it match the wording in 1641, because then let's say when we go to SBE, if SBE decided to put out a different cert alert, a new certificate alert saying that that the teacher preparation programs will have some sort of testing that they do in order to use as a diagnostic tool to help for remediation, then that's much more flexible, and the state board could do that without necessarily, they could do that faster and probably in a parallel path to getting the law changed. Does that make sense? Should I reword that?
So it sounds like you'd like to amend this to reflect the language that Julianne dropped in there.
Yeah, so give me 1 second, I can make an amendment. But it would basically be just like Catherine said. It would be to replace it with this language. So each person formally admitted to, oh, someone else posted something up. Okay. Each person formally admitted to a state board of education approved teacher preparation program shall take the state reading, writing, and mathematics competency examination prescribed by and administered under the direction of the state board of education. I would like to change one word of that, because the state board of education approves exams but does not administer exams. So one more edit, and I think this will work. Then in the meantime, right, because right now the State Board of Ed has approved SAT, GRE, ACT, Praxis Core, right? Then when the State Board of Education puts out a new cert alert, then this still works. This language in the regulation still matches the law, and we can work in parallel to change the law in the meantime. So I'm just getting rid of the language and administered under the direction of the State Board of Education, because they don't administer examinations per se.
While you're doing that, I'm going to go to Shannon really quickly, and then I'll go to Sarah and then Dr. Rowe.
Yeah, I just wanted to get some clarity. I guess what I'm trying to understand is this just an exercise to get a cleaned up version of the regs as reconciled with statute before we do anything new or transformational? Like, we're just like cleaning up. We're not trying to introduce new concepts. Or
No, I
ideas.
think it's two things, right? We're definitely bringing everything up to speed, but out of that conversation can spark legislative fixes that we think are new concepts or better, recommendations. But yes, I think there's two things happening in tandem. We are
Okay.
definitely bringing everything up to speed because it hasn't been done in 30 years. And based on even the conversation we just heard, there's an opportunity for new legislation to kind of reimagine this in a different way and make it more flexible. And remove barriers and that sort of thing.
But at this time, we can't change regs that don't align with statute. Like, we have to
Correct.
just do a literal translation of what's in statute into the regs to have a cleaned up set of regs. And then I think at the same time, try to be aspirational and maybe not be held back by the regs
Correct.
or statute from what could be possible. So I think
Correct.
it's trying to like hold these two things at the same
Right.
time. That's challenging, but I think that's helpful framing.
Yes. Thank you. Sarah, go ahead. Thank you, Shannon.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page that the state reading, writing, and mathematics competency examination that examination is either Praxis Core, SAT, ACT, GRE. Okay, because I was like, does the state have an assessment of their own? Okay, thank you.
All right, and Dr. Rowe?
So I just wanted to clarify, many state institutions and some privates are test optional. So it's no longer where you need an SAT in order to move into the undergraduate space. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's not that it's a requirement anyway. I think I hear what you're trying to say here. I think that saying that they have to do this is now more prescriptive than what we even had. So I'm just trying to avoid our candidates having to pay for an additional assessment and mentally feeling that this is a barrier to them entering the profession. That is what I'm trying to, whatever the language is, that's what I'm just trying to convey here. I understand the limitations with the law, but we have to be able to provide something that provides more flexibility. Saying that they have to take this assessment does not provide that flexibility. And if we're innovating and if we're updating outdated regulations, that's something that we really do need to address. I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe. I think that we have that written down as a legislative idea for us to kind of move forward and ponder with as a legislative fix as well. So thank you. I do see Julianne's hand, and then can I go to you, Kristen?
Mhm.
All right, Julianne, go ahead.
One thing that I think it's maybe helpful for everyone to understand is because regulations have been so difficult to change, we've had a lot of statutes put in as band-aids. And the problem is the statute overrides the regulation. So no matter what we say in the regulation, if there's a statute that says something more specific, we can't undo that statute. So that's why this has to become a legislative change. If you want to say we don't want Praxis Core or Praxis or SATs, we could potentially remove it completely from the regs because there's no point in having it. If our goal is to get rid of it or to make it something less, you could remove it completely from the regs and then work on new legislation that also says we're going to get rid of that statute, or we're going to make it a little more flexible at the statute level. But I think that's why this is so much more complicated, because statute overrides. And so if the statute says you need to do something, you can get specific in the regs. But if the statute says sets a baseline, you can't do anything different that goes beyond that. And that's where we have the issue.
Thank you. I appreciate this very robust conversation around this and trying to figure out the best pathway for it. So thank you all. Kristen, go ahead.
Yeah, and if I could just close on 404, it is also a law that all 11th grade public school students in Connecticut take the SAT for free during a school day. So if EPPs are just required to show that the kids have taken the SAT, all Connecticut 11th graders will have taken the SAT for free during the school day in the 11th grade. So I know it is a barrier. I know we have it written down as an idea to make more flexible through legislation. But I think that, with the SAT being offered for free during the school day, that is something that has gotten easier over time. The SAT replaced the SBAC for 11th grade a few years ago. I don't remember how far.
Just making a quick comment.
Go ahead, Mel.
90% of our students here, Sacred Heart, Quinnipiac, Fairfield, come from New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. just throwing that out there.
All right, Jen Delaney, and then we will go over to Lauren.
Yes, also just the majority of my people who end up taking the Praxis Core are people coming from international institutions and starting their careers here as teachers.
Thank you, Jen. All right, Lauren. Oh, did she go away?
Oh,
Yeah, no, I'm
Oh,
here.
there she
I
is.
was just going to echo, even at the state universities in Yukon, not all university students attended a Connecticut public school. And if what Julianne is saying, that statute supersedes regulation, and if the ultimate goal is to remove the requirement of Praxis 1 altogether, then it may be better to just allow this one to sunset or change it to get rid of it completely, because that 2016 legislation that spoke to using it as a diagnostic tool, operationally, that's not a thing. The universities don't use it in that way. You have scenarios where folks are coming in without the SAT now that schools have gone test optional. They come from other states or other countries. Nobody's enrolling in the ed prep portion of their institution that first semester freshman year. So if they've already been admitted to a university, by the time they're applying to their teacher prep program, which would be maybe like late sophomore year, the institution will have their own mechanism for determining whatever coursework was required to apply. And then anything that's operationally not part of a bachelor's degree program, you're talking about graduate school, or if it's an alternate route, those individuals already have a bachelor's degree. So it seems like if the long-term plan is to not require it at all, then getting into the weeds of like perfecting some language that will just ultimately be obsolete may not, be the way you want to go.
So is the motion then currently to remove this portion and pursue a legislative fix?
I file a
Is that what-
motion to remove this and file a legislative pursuit to change that law.
Okay, do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Shannon Merriman, thank you. All right, I think we've had a lot of discussion. And if we need to have more discussion, raise your hand now. Otherwise, we'll go directly to a vote. And this is specific to, I just want to make sure, if you scroll up a little bit there, Karen. Would this be specific to A and B or just A? Because does this tie into B as well, Kristen?
So A and B are only related in that they're both assessment requirements. So I think this would only need to be for 4A. We haven't discussed 4B yet.
Okay, so for 10-145D 404A, the motion is to remove this from our consideration, allow it to sunset while we pursue a legislative fix. We had the motion by Dr. Rowe and it was seconded by Shannon. I don't see additional discussion at this time, so we're going to go ahead and move it to a vote. So we'll start off with myself. Yes, Dr. Ritchie,
Yes.
Kristen,
Yes.
Elsa,
Yes.
Tiffany,
Yes.
Jen Delaney,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Jenny Graves. I think she might have had to step away. Margaret,
Yes.
Mel,
Yes.
Hamish,
Yes.
Shannon,
Yes.
Patrice. Is she still on? All right, Catherine,
Yes, thank you.
Bob. That was a yes from Bob, I think. Cynthia.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, the motion carries. All right. So if we want to move forward, there's a couple things that we can do. We've all had an opportunity to look over the regulations in general. If the rest of the regulations seem to be in line and folks don't have any questions on the rest of the regulations, I know this was a big topic here. There could be a motion to accept the regulations to move to LPCD without further discussion or to continue moving forward.
I recommend we, I'm sorry, Mel, I didn't put my hand up.
All right, Mel, go ahead.
I recommend we do take time to discuss them. There is a lot of meat here, and it's not just updating language, it's actually thinking through the operational pieces, which are equally as important. So I would prefer to take our time on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Horton, did you feel the same way? I see you nodding your head.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right. I just wanted to give that opportunity. That's something that came up at the last meeting. So I wanted to give that opportunity and that option should the board decide that that was the way that they wanted to move. So if we go ahead and scroll down then to 404B, Karen. A little bit farther so we can see the remainder of it on the next page. Oh, maybe not. Up, yeah, keep going up. There we go.
All right.
Thank you.
So 404B is subject area knowledge. So we've actually already taken a vote on this as a board in terms of we had voted to continue to use Praxis 2, ACTFL, and the other subject area knowledge tests as ways to assess teachers' content knowledge. I forget in which month we took a vote on that, but it was a while back. And some of the arguments that were made in order to keep Praxis 2 was that we felt that EPPs needed to have that data in order to show that they were teaching content knowledge as part of their requirements for CAPE. So this made the language more flexible. So it took out connect, which is no longer offered, added ACTFL, which is currently offered, and left all the other subject areas assessments as just in general, because there are so many. Instead of saying, you know, in which areas the subject area assessment would be required, and of those, some were no longer required, we wanted to make it more flexible. And in the ad hoc committee, we settled on subject area knowledge shall be required in any area as made available by the board. So taking this assessment would be required if the State Board of Ed has a specific test that they want them to take.
Thank you, Kristen.
Section,
I like, I'm sorry. I like the part that says or other subject areas because as we know, we've accepted the bridge and future versions of the bridge. So that would be covered under that without having to explicitly state each one of those. So I like that. Thank you.
For section C, that's professional knowledge. This was how does how to receive your provisional educator certificate through the BEST assessment. So that's no longer required. So Karen, if you could scroll through C. BEST assessment is no longer required because it's now changed to team, but it's also not a requirement for provisional because provisional is no longer offered. Section 412 is a very lengthy section. Most of these things the ad hoc committee is recommended that we reinstate as written with only a few edits, but especially under conditions for issuance A3. A3 is an applicant who has not completed a regular planned program of preparation. Instead, they show evidence of 20 school months of successful teaching or service in the same public school system, approved, non-public, or by the appropriate governing body in adult education. That whole section is that transcript experience pathway that we've talked about and approved as a legislative amendment to go forward already. So these were the regulations I was promising that go along with the transcript experience pathway. So if you are an initial educator, you are going to hold a bachelor's degree, complete an EPP. If you haven't completed an EPP, you're going to go through this transcript experience pathway in 3A. If you keep scrolling. In B, that's your alternate route pathway. So you complete your alternate route, you serve your 90 days, and after your 90-day certificate is up, then your employer signs your attestation saying that you're ready for your initial educator certificate. So path B is your alternate route pathway. 4, saying that you have to complete a course in special education, not fewer than 36 clock hours, is a law, so we can't change that language, but it specifies that at some point within your in your planned program of study, you do have to study special education. 4A has this additional call out for certain endorsement areas. So reading and language arts, intermediate in administration and supervision, superintendent of schools. And those fields, it says specifically that we shall be fulfilling the special education course requirement. The reason it's written that way is, let's say you're a transfer from an out-of-state school and you came in through the NASDAQ interstate agreement, for instance, in which you don't necessarily have to submit a transcript. Well, then you still need to take the 36 clock hours if you're going for one of these fields. So you still have to take special education if you're transferring into one of these fields. And if you, in B, don't have your course in special education of at least 36 clock hours, then you get your interim educator certificate and you complete this coursework within the next year.
I see a hand up. Go ahead, Mel.
Are we not going to update the language in 4, or are you going to do that at another time? Like handicapped? So
we could update it right now.
Well, and again, this is me being new and not being in the previous conversations. So if we're voting on these changes in red now, but there's other things, does that mean none of these other things have been looked at to be updated? Like, why wouldn't we just do it all at once?
Yeah, so the ad hoc committee it'd go line by line through all of these before. No one had called out needing to change this language for including handicapped, gifted, and talented children or children who may require special education. So if that's something we wanted to talk about right now, we could. I do want to go back to the law and see if the law that requires the 36 clock hours has this language specifically to make sure that we're not like writing something that supersedes the law, but we could discuss that language if we wanted to.
Thank you. I think it's a good point. Thank you for bringing it up. And this is, one of the reasons why we go through the ad hoc and then also bring it to the full board for that discussion and amendments there. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, Dean Horton. Julianne, go ahead, and then Lauren.
I just wanted to point out that we would love to change this language because it is so outdated, the terminology. But again, this is one of those situations where I'm pretty sure this language is exactly pulled from statute. So we might want to propose new language that is more up to date, that is also going to need to be brought forward as a legislative change, because I believe even the 36 clock hour, like everyone's confused, like why they didn't say 3 credits. And the only reason they did that, there used to be like a through CERC, or there was something where like an administrator could go and do modules and that it was equivalent. So I think that's why they use 36 clock hours, but I think the whole thing should be more like 3, or maybe we want to make it 6. I don't know, but we do need to do it, but it's going to be in legislation too.
Okay, thank you. Lauren, were you echoing the same?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. I think what's important to think about in terms of this specific section is how it will intersect with whatever is determined when you get to the individual endorsement areas. And when we think about, what does a teacher need to know and be able to do in 2025? Do you want to constrain yourself to the only special education course, being that general educators have, is this one sort of prescriptive 36 clock hour? So I think once you think about how you want to modernize the language of this course, you may want to think even potentially more broadly or deeply about when we think about what do today's educators need, is 36 hours of instruction and working with children with, various needs sufficient for today's teachers?
Thank you, Lauren. Mel, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna, thanks, Lauren. I was gonna say that I think trying to do that language in a setting like this would, be very time consuming. It maybe we could work with the ad hoc committee to come up with new language particularly in the way Lauren's talking about when we're looking at the other content for the endorsement program approval, that maybe we can put this on hold and look at the language when we're in those meetings and then bring it back to this group, to your ad hoc committee to see if you, I don't think we should try to change it on this Zoom call.
Okay, thank you.
I think we'll be here until tomorrow if we try to do that.
All right. So is there, are we saying that there's a motion for this specific area to return back to the ad hoc committee? Is that what we're stating? Or is it the whole section? So the whole of section 412, or is the motion just for that area where it speaks to special education, students with disabilities? Kristen?
I would strongly suggest not sending 412 back to the ad hoc committee as a whole, but maybe we say like that 412A4A, so many symbols. Okay, 412A4A just needs to be revised. And the reason I would say not to send all of the section 412 back is because the transcript experience pathway is a really essential way to get educators into our state, and from not only other states that don't have an interstate agreement, but from other countries. That really needs to start going forward as quickly as possible, just because we have the legislative fix for it, and that is on its way. But if that does not go through, we want to have a backup plan so that the hundreds of educators that come in every year through the transcript experience pathway have a way to get certified in Connecticut.
Okay,
I did
you.
see.
Oh, sorry. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I did see that in the chat. Athena has said maybe wording like changing students with disabilities instead of using the word handicapped, because she was saying that she would be surprised that if it was considered different from the intention of the statute, just to change that language, right? So if that seems to be the consensus, I would be happy to change the word handicapped to children with disabilities, as Athena brought up.
All right, we've got some hands up here. Dr. Rowe?
Can I make a motion that we could approve with amendments and then we can address the 36 credit hours? I think a minimum of 36 credit hours to that point, because we might want to have 2 courses. New York requires 2 courses in special education. So I just want to put that out there for reciprocity. And then we can change an update for people first language. And then moving forward, maybe we want to make sure that we use people first language when we're moving these things through. Thanks for picking that up, Dr. Horton.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe. Who do I have here? Athena?
I think Dr. Rowe covered it. Totally agree with the conversations about thinking about this again once you get into the specific certifications and reciprocity. Yeah, so great. Thanks. And I'm happy to provide any additional input on that if necessary. Thanks.
So is the recommendation right now that you are putting down for amendments then to change that for students with disabilities? And are you changing the 36 clock hours as well, or no?
So the reason I'm not changing the 36 clock hours is it already says not fewer than 36 clock hours. So they're saying a minimum of 36.
But to Lauren's point, what if 36 clock hours? Like maybe if we're going to make things more current, maybe we need to make them more current.
It does have a definition of clock hours versus credit hours in the regulations in a different section where they go through all the different definitions, but it already says minimum. It just says it in older language. So not fewer than 36 clock hours.
And that was the key, Kristen, older language. So I'm just saying maybe minimum of 1 course, maybe 2.
I'm wondering if it has to be changed in legislation in order for that to happen. So that might be a legislative fix that we add to our list of many legislative fixes that we will probably want to put through. All right, so then are we ready to move to the next section then?
Yes. Julia's put into a chat from the Connecticut General Statutes from 2019. So she has put in some language regarding
That's
that.
just so you can see what's in statute.
Right. So if you wanted to.
So statute already
can-
says exceptional children,
Yeah, it
Yes.
children with a
updated the
disability.
language.
They already got rid of handicapping in statute.
Yes. Yeah. So actually, how about this as a proposal? So I have, at the end of this document, I have down removing 404A. What if when I make my motion, I move all of 412 forward except for 412A4A, and the next time we go to the ad hoc, we'll make section 412A4A match the language from 2019, which goes 36 hours and then has their additional requirements, growth and development of children, methods for identifying, planning, and working with children with special needs. Because it's still 36 hours, right? Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
statute still says 36 hours, which is basically
Yeah.
3 credits, but it's, yeah.
Kristen, do
Right.
we need to bring it back to ad hoc? I mean, do we need to bring, or can we just approve with amendments that you're setting forth right now? I kind of seems that it sets it back then.
I see Mel's got her hand up as well. Were you thinking the same thing, Mel?
No, no, I was questioning, and Julianne will understand this, I think, as a former certification officer, if we may take that whole language from the statute and put it in there, and then I'm reviewing someone's transcript and this from another university, maybe it's from Massachusetts, and they don't have the syllabus, and I don't know if they included assistive technology. So there's a little bit of danger in taking the language verbatim, because then we're the sort of officers having go, okay, did they have gifted and talented? Did they have social emotional learning? Did they have cultural responsive pedagogy and assistive? You see what I'm getting at? Those that are on the call who've
do.
ever done CERT.
And that's what we do
Reviewed
all the
this.
time, looking at courses. We're like, oh, they took a
Ah.
special ed course, but does it include everything?
So the more general you can make it, but still meet the spirit of the statute, I think the better. That's why I would encourage us to, move this forward and then come back and look at the language. Move the piece forward, Kristen, that you're wanting to go forward, and look at this sped language later, because it's going to come up again. We don't have to fix this right now, unless you're saying we can't go back and fix it in A, but I'm hearing that we can later come back and update this language.
So the regulations ad hoc has a meeting on Friday. Their materials already went out, but I think having this discussion, I think they'd be willing to have this added on to that materials that they were going to look at, so that we can get it prepared for the next meeting, if that's fine. So it sounds like we're going to move forward everything but A4A to be revised to match statute, right? Okay. So if we move on to the next component. So are we on 414, temporary 90-day certificate, which we talked about a little bit earlier?
Sorry, my computer just did something weird. Okay. So the reason as I mentioned earlier, the reason that this temporary 90-day certificate language looks different is that in statute, the law requiring about the certification requirements for a temporary 90-day certificate is spelled out specifically. So if we were making the changes we wanted to, it would contradict what the law was saying. So this language is the only language that has not gone through the ad hoc already, because it had actually gone through the ad hoc to the board. And when it was found that there was like a law that would supersede this, I made the changes to update where necessary, but you guys are the first to overview them. So if any sort of feedback, any amendments or discussion you want to have, this is about the temporary 90-day certificate. So like Jen Delaney, if you have comments from ARC, that would be useful. But that's also why I couldn't remove the really prescriptive grade point average of at least a quote B. While I would like to remove that, that is literally word for word from the law. So
Yeah, we talked about that last time. Hi, everybody. So I, of course, read through this. You know, our hands are tied where they're tied. I think that if we want to propose any new language, just like the ones we just went through, to legislation, we can do so. Julianne says she's checking on the number of the statute. Are you talking about this, Lauren and Julianne?
I think she's talking about the other statute that
the
was
other one.
referenced in the
Okay, I just want to
chat,
make
the
sure I'm
Yeah,
not.
no, so I'm talking
Yeah,
about the
yeah.
special ed one. Yeah.
Okay, I want to make sure I wasn't overlooking something pertinent to what I'm talking about. So yeah, again, that GPA piece of it, we're a grad program. More than 50% of our candidates traditionally have a master's or a doctorate coming in. So it's not something we look at that happens too often, but once in a while there's been many years since a bachelor's degree has been acquired, and we offer waivers once in a while. And it happens, but if we can't make the changes we were talking about last time, we can't. So I think everything's fine here. So that I saw, I wonder what I really think about when I'm thinking of the 90-day. We had this conversation way back when. I can't even remember what time of year it was, but it was a long time ago. And there was a proposal at one point, or I think it was sunsetting at one point, that this actually be removed. And we talked about, oh no, we need to keep this 90-day cert for these reasons, but also maybe there's ways that the 90-day cert can be used in the future that we haven't even considered yet. So for now, I think this is okay. It meets the needs of the current programs that utilize it. And I think moving forward, it would be more about, how could maybe the 90-day cert be used in different ways? Maybe the 90-day cert is used in one of these alternate plans that we are putting forward, et cetera. So there's, maybe there's a new program that might be developed where 90-day cert would make sense. So I think moving forward, I would like to look at it that way, but currently I'm okay with how things are written here.
And maybe this becomes that legislative fix that we talked about. And I think that your voice is part of that conversation for the language of a legislative fix would be, really valuable in seeing how we can make it more flexible and, kind of reimagine it even for future things that we haven't decided on yet or we haven't created yet. I think some of the conversation that we had early on with this was that we wouldn't need the 90-day cert if and when, right, the alternative route programs possibly change their programming a bit. There's also opportunity and flexibility there of us just kind of getting rid of the need for it, depending on the alternative routes programming and the autonomy that they have in that programming. So it's definitely something good for additional conversation. I appreciate that. Thank you, Jen. And go ahead, Julianne.
The question I have, so I know in Public Act 2441, it now says an alternate route leads to an initial. But the programs that we currently have were not approved. They don't meet the requirements for an initial. So if we can't find a way to, I totally get, like, the new statute says moving forward, any ARC, if we have a new ARC, it's going to have to come in and lead to an initial. But what do we do about the existing ones? Because you can't take a program that didn't prepare you. It's like saying, I got my associates and now officially I get an initial certificate. Like, you can't give someone an initial certificate if they've done an ARC program because they haven't completed the 90 days. So I'm still confused on why you're saying we can make changes to 414, or like one of them you said we can't do those, but we can do these. Like either we can or we can't. And so can you clarify more on what you're trying to do with 414?
Thank you, Julianne.
Yeah, for 414, I was basically just trying to take an existing regulation and match it to statute, because the regulation had things like the praxis 1 in there and concept, and also had changes, like the underlined in red are changes that were outlined in statute. So I was trying to make the regulation match statute.
I think
so you're
is what
saying
I'm-
statute says that their major has to be in a closely related area, even though we also have statute that says you can take a test and that's your major.
Yeah, we talked about that last time, remember? I don't know if everyone we talked about the fact that now you can take the Praxis 1 coming in, Praxis 2 coming in. And I'm curious if we can't write that in because of the way it's written now, like that's the confusion around this. And I'm wondering if that comes from before my time, from one of the State Department of Ed, bulletins. Am I using the right language?
The CERT alerts.
The CERT alerts, thank you. Is that
Yeah,
where
the,
that
the
came
CERT,
from
the
before I
CERT alerts are
got
just when
here?
we put out, we specify here, a new law went into play, here's the new law. It's just us putting it in regular
Gotcha,
language instead of
okay.
legal language. We don't
Yeah.
make those up. We take the legal language and we say, this is what it means. Here's what the new law says. So, and that was because there was a new law that said a major could be met by having a passing score on the praxis content test. So I think we can still do that, even if you don't
can.
change this part of the language. I do think we need to change about the participation in what used to be best. It should not be shall participate. It should be may, because most people, they're completing their 90 days, which is basically an extension of their student teaching. For them to then be doing team at the same time is too much. There are occasional rare cases where someone's ready to go and they're ready to jump right in and do team. But for the most part, I think we should minimally change the will to shall to may. But
That makes sense. I mean, we've heard from graduates that some school districts have them participate and some don't. So it seems to be district decision based. But I do like the idea of having the may instead of the shall in that section. That makes sense. And it just sounds like we have a glitch now because we want to keep the 90-day cert for obvious purposes, but at the same time, it sounds like there's that new regulation that 90-day or ARC programs lead to an initial.
Right.
Am I hearing
And
that right, Julianne?
And I think we can perceive that as new ARC programs wouldn't have to lead to initial, but how do we ensure that we have existing programs that are ARC programs that lead to a 90-day? Those people who go through those existing programs that were approved as 90-day programs have to still get the 90-day.
Yes.
And if they so they can't be recommended for initial. So if you don't find a way to keep 90-day, then anybody who's in those programs, they're going to have a program that leads to nothing. Or do we just be like, oh, we're going to give them the initial, even though they haven't completed full student teaching that's also required in regs? I mean, it's a catch-22, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we talked about that last time.
So Kristen, what would this look like in terms of adjusting it to bringing it to current levels? And then we can delve into a possible legislative fix for the 90-day. Would the may still work with that?
Yeah, I think the may would work. So I have that written down.
I think what Julianne is saying is there's new legislation that conflicts with this, but we can look at this as almost like a grandfathered in because the programs So is that something we need to say in the legislation? That's not something I had considered before.
I think in justifying
Or
the
excuse me, in the
legislation,
regulation. Yeah.
the regulation just makes clear the statute. But if
Mhm.
we're looking to change the statute, then that might be part of the justification portion of the change to statute and the legislative fix that would be required.
I think I asked my question poorly.
Sorry if I misunderstood.
No, I don't think I asked it well. So should we, somewhere in here, talk about the concern that Julianne just brought up, which is the new legislation describes that alternate programs have to lead to an initial. But my alternate program and Charter Oaks does not. It leads to a 90-day. So should we write something in here around the fact that like existing prior to July 2025, existing ARC programs that led to a 90-day will maintain that?
Yeah, they can still lead to a 90-day because we don't want to
Right.
shut the door on the 90-day
Right.
programs that have already been there. That's my concern. Like, that's fine. You want to create new arcs that lead straight to initial, go for it. But then, it's just like, how do you, when you're making any kind of change, are you going to shut the door on people who are halfway through an ARC program? You're like, oh, sorry, it doesn't lead to anything now because we
Right.
can't issue it. And I don't think that's the intent.
Yeah. And it's also,
Right.
I have, as part of accreditation, just so everyone on the board knows who's not on an EPP, part of the standard 5 of the CAPE standards is we have to be having a quality assurance system. We have to be having clear, valid and reliable data that helps us decide on continuous improvement of our program, et cetera. And we did a study on this at ARC last year around, well, would it be possible to extend the practicum to 10 plus weeks, and so that we can go straight to initial? And the results of that data review, qualitative and quantitative, really showed us that, you know what, we really need to maintain an 8-week option for student teaching, because half of our people are in a regular full-time job and they cannot leave their job and not be paying their mortgages for longer than whatever amount of time they need to be gone already from their job. Because then they go back to it after practicum, then they start teaching whenever they start teaching, which is usually in the fall. So we have about a 50-50. Every year it's in that range. So it would be very detrimental to our program. I'd have to ask Charter Oak about theirs and what they have seen in their program, but it would be very detrimental to not write something in, maybe here, that talks about what Julianne is saying, where we say kind of like we're grandfathered in. So how would we do that? What does everyone think?
Kristen,
I think
what are your thoughts on adding that in?
I mean, I think on one hand, this is saying, when do you issue a temporary 90-day cert? So this isn't the requirements for initial cert. This is the requirements to give you a 90-day cert to allow you to go work for a board of education and do your 90 days and finish your student teaching. So I think that the Public Act says that it has to lead to initial is it's kind of an additional problem. But if we're talking about like the alternate route to licensure programs that require a 90-day cert, we could try to write language. I just don't know if a whole many-person board meeting is the best place to write it all. Do we have people that have recommendations on what to change it to? Because remember, this is not saying like what is needed for initial. This is saying, when do I give this graduate from ARC a 90-day certificate so they can go off and do their thing? And Jenna, I need to step away for 2 seconds, but I will be right back. And I'm sure there's plenty of discussion.
Thank you.
Kristen, before you go, can I just ask you a question? Because I know I don't know how long you're going to be gone, but isn't
like
this
2 minutes?
Isn't this something that we can ask the legislative support or whoever's on the board, the legal person who's supposed to be helping us unpack this? Isn't this isn't this a job
Great
for?
idea. Yeah.
It's
I
a
think
great
that's
idea.
part of the legislative fix that could potentially come out of this, right? We talk about
Yeah.
these regulations and then potential legislative fixes as part of her
Mhm.
scope. So that might be the legislative fix that we want to go into.
Mhm.
Go ahead,
We keep
Kristen,
it-
and pop off for a couple minutes because I know that you have to take care of something.
Yes.
And then in terms of this portion of it, though, based on what we just heard, this is just what is needed to issue a 90-day certificate. Is this fine as is until we do a legislative fix? Lauren, go ahead.
You know, I just wanted to echo what Kristen said. Like this little section of the regulations is simply like what are the conditions for issuing the temporary 90-day. Again, when you think about one thing to think about when it comes to sort of alternate routes kind of writ large, because Public Act 2441 did include that language of people going, some programs for the alternate routes to go to an initial, but it had like kind of some specificity as to how they'd have to be designed. We currently in Connecticut don't have separate regulations for alternate route programs versus, you know, if you think about traditional programs being credit-bearing entities, alternate route programs being non-credit-bearing entities, you may want to, before you're doing any kind of legislative fix relative to this, when you're getting to the sections about what do programs require,
Mhm.
this group maybe needs to think about, does Connecticut want to have a separate set of requirements? You know, like you have to kind of think about it in a sort of both broad and narrow way relative to what do educator preparation programs in Connecticut have to demonstrate that their candidates, you know, sort of know and are able to do. If all programs moving forward after Public Act 2441 have to inherently go to an initial, then you'll have to think about a different construct for those alternate route programs that may go straight to an initial. Like to Jen Delaney's point, her current program for an alternate route is designed to not have a traditional student teaching placement, to go to the temporary 90-day. Same for the Charter Oak early childhood program. So I think you're fine to leave this how it's been edited because you still want those temporary 90 days. But I don't think you're ready as a board to have any kind of legislative fix relative to this until you've answered your sort of like larger philosophical questions about, is Connecticut, some states have separate rules regarding alternate preparation. Some states don't. Like, are
Mhm.
you going to hold, if everything leads to an initial, whether it's a credit-bearing program or a non-credit-bearing program, if everyone obtains that same certificate at the end of the program, then you'll want to think about, do all programs have to meet the same requirements? If at the end, everybody's going to come out with the same thing, then how are you ensuring equity and parity among programs that everyone has to sort of prepare candidates accordingly? So
Mhm.
my guess is like you're kind of not ready to know the answer to that yet
Mhm.
until you've done a lot of other
Yeah.
work.
So the great
So-
thing is that Lauren and Jen and Mel and Catherine Rowe will be working on those Ed Prep program approvals, right? So there's an opportunity to incorporate and delve into that discussion as well as possibly at our December meeting in the morning when we're talking about reimagining things and how we would want to make them more flexible when it relates to the preparation program approval routes. So with that in mind, are we good with just this as it is, knowing that we're going to be working on ed prep programs, maybe thinking about whether we think it should be separate from traditional and ARC, having them have different ones, and then making a legislative fix coming out of those conversations.
Well, I feel okay because it says right in the first line, board approved alternate route to licensure programs, and we are board approved to go to a 90-day cert. It's just that glitch of it not lining up with the new language. Because something I was thinking of putting here is, you know, programs prior to XYZ, but we don't really need it because it does just say board approved alternate route.
So would the
So
only amendment be may then that we talked about earlier, changing shall to may?
yeah, because the other things we can't change right now that we talked about last, that we can't change those things. So yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So if we scroll up, I'm not sure if Kristen's back yet or not, but if we scroll up, we have cross endorsement. And I think we're nearly done with this document, so good timing. So reissue, I think we're on what, 428A4, right? Cross endorsements. Everyone takes just a quick moment to read that over.
So DSAP was before that. Does it matter?
Oh, sorry, did I miss it? I did miss it, sorry, 422. Thanks, Mel. I was scrolling too fast on my own screen. All right, take a moment to read that portion over. I see Kristen is back. Okay. Kristen, do you want to speak to the DSAP shortage area permit?
Yeah. So one of the changes that we discussed for durational shortage area permit is increasing the number of times that a candidate can get reissued a DSAP. Essentially, it started as 2, then I believe during COVID it went up to 3, and now our ad hoc committee is suggesting 4, because for every year that a person is on a DSAP, they have to continually show for reissuance that they have some sort of hardship reason. This is allowing them to get DSAP'd into schools more easily. Some other language we considered and looked at but didn't end up changing was the language in 1B saying that, you know, if they haven't completed 9 semester hours, if they have completed 9 semester hours, they can get an initial deferral. We considered changing that for instead of first and second reissuance to maybe second or third reissuance. But our thinking on not changing that language is because if you are operating under a DSAP, you're teaching in a classroom, you should be moving along in your planned program of study. You should be taking your coursework and getting it done. And, you know, after your first and second reissuance, you're at 3 years. You really should have done at least 9 semester hours of credit in those years. We also changed the language for BEST to Beginning Educator Induction Program. We didn't want to specify team in case the name of that changes. And then later in the definitions part of the regs, we would include Beginning Educator Induction Program and describe that, you know, mentoring program for new teachers.
Is there any discussion around that? Oh, I see Mel's hand. Go ahead.
I don't have a discussion. I just want clarification. So is this saying that a person could DSAP for 5 years?
Yes.
And still not be certified?
Right. So the 5th year would only be if they had some sort of hardship. So additional reissuance with evidence of hardship.
And currently, aren't they able to DSAP, what is it, 3 years? Okay. Julianne, I see your hand is raised.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Currently, you can have 1 DSAP and 2 renewals. So you can have 3, and then we have like a hardship where you can get a 4th. So really, it's just giving 1 additional one. The reason that we were thinking this might be helpful is there are people who maybe start along in the program, they end up leaving, like they don't serve that whole year, and maybe like we had issues where tests weren't available when COVID hit. That's where it started. That's why we had, well, we need another one because they couldn't take the test. So usually this is someone who hasn't passed a test by which is why you want to see the 9 credits. You want to see the credits completing, but the idea is to allow them to continue serving while they're giving them more time to deal with testing issues that they may have. And that's why the extra extension without having to go through like a hardship situation. These apps have become much more flexible over the years. So originally they were just for designated, like the national designated shortage areas. And then it kind of became, well, it was all of our shortage areas. And then after COVID hit, it became really any area could be a shortage area, even could be elementary, but I'm in the quiet northeast corner of the state and I can't find someone to come and serve. And so, you know, they need more time. That's where the extension was looked at for there. So it typically would be, again, more like testing. And I'm sure Kaylin can add more.
Kaylin, go ahead.
I just wanted to add that it was also put into place that we wanted to give flexibility to the districts for them to be able to make a decision of what's a shortage for them and to be able to put someone in a position that they felt was the best fit. So it did move away from that strict federal shortage area, but at the end of the day, it doesn't even really need to be a shortage area. It can be a shortage area for that particular district. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. All right, Bob, go ahead.
I do a lot of work with folks on DSAPs in my district, and I do find that human nature is kind of leads them to, if they have 3 years, or 2 renewals, they might tend to not get that coursework done, and then there's when it push comes to shove and we say, well, what was the hardship? They come up with something. And I just think that it would be okay, because there's certain circumstances where, an additional year could really benefit the individual and the students and the school district. But I just had a question, that additional year we're talking about with a hardship, just like with any other request for a DSAP, I mean, the district would have to agree with the hardship and put that forward. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, DSAPs are only issued upon the request of a district. So this just gives the district, if they want the ability to have additional time, if they don't even apply for the second DSAP, that's their choice. It just means the law says you can if you want to. So it's really in the hands of the district to decide.
Okay, I think that is an important piece of that. So thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Julianne.
And districts usually send an accompanying letter with the application as well to let us know if they're aware of situation that required a hardship or if there was something going on in the district. So they're usually very forthcoming about that, either in strong support of the candidate in those rare situations.
Okay, thank you. Moving forward, I don't see any additional hands. All right, so we're on to cross endorsement then.
There we go. Microphone's muted. Okay, so section 428 was not repealed. So we're not trying to fix something that's sunset. But the certification staff pointed out that in the cross endorsement for bilingual, there was a barrier for people who were going for their bilingual cross endorsement. Because the cross endorsement required all of their credit hours to be completed at one regionally accredited college or university, that left some candidates who, started their coursework in other states, or the courses weren't offered at one school, so they weren't able to get their work done. That offered a barrier to them. I actually know someone who's was on this call, I don't know if they're still on this call, that literally did not get their bilingual cross endorsement because of this one bit of language, that because it had to be completed at one school, their other credits would not have counted. And so they just did not get a bilingual cross endorsement. I know that this language was put forward by the staff from the certification department, and they were told to send it through the certification board. So I know that this is a priority for them. I also know that it was on the list of priorities for the talent office. So moving it from one university to no more than 2 universities for bilingual cross endorsement.
I like the flexibility of it. I can tell you that, having taken courses in my grad program that when I came to the end of some of my lists, and this wasn't specific to bilingual, not all the courses were offered sequentially every single semester. So it would prolong that opportunity where bilingual is one of our shortage areas. This provides a level of flexibility in opening this up and meeting a need and getting more people into the field a little bit more quickly. So I think it's an appropriate space. So I appreciate SDE bringing that forward to us. Jenny Graves?
Just a quick question. Is there a reason why we would limit it at all?
So back when the regs were originally written, there's a lot of thought around bilingual, and the groups back then wanted it to be a planned program. They wanted it to be just like the remedial reading and language arts, where they have to go and be accepted into a university and with a result of an institutional recommendation. The original thought, due to continuity and having coursework that builds off each other in one institution, but then they agreed to allow it to be just 18 credits in the bilingual taken at one university. Now, most of our Connecticut educators are going to go to our identified Connecticut institutions. This is a lot more for our educators that come from another state that may have done some coursework in bilingual at their institution during their undergrad. So now we can accept that and allow them to continue at one additional institution. It's really about how the coursework builds off of each other and having that continuity. And there's a lot of people, out in the field that would definitely support maybe the two, but moving away from that and maybe 3 or 4 institutions, I can't say. And Julianne, please chime in if they would support that.
Julianne, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, another thing is you might have someone who did a TESOL program and now they say, oh, I want to get bilingual. One of the requirements you need for both TESOL and for bilingual is a methods of ESL methods. If I took an ESL methods at a school that didn't have any other bilingual coursework, then I have to start all over again and retake that course. So that's why the idea was we're trying to honor the fact that they wanted it to be a one institution. That was their give years ago, rather than saying a planned program, and let's at least have 2, so that you're not, if you've done 1 or 2 classes, you're not starting over again. Or we've had cases where somebody did the program, they did the coursework in another state, and we have to say, I'm sorry, you have to go back to Arizona, or where it didn't make sense.
No, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Are there any other questions about this particular area? All right, let's keep scrolling down. I think we're at secondary.
Yes, and all the remaining ones are pertaining to the grade level change in Public Act 2441. So all the 7 through 12 certs are now changed to 4 through 12 certs for secondary academic subjects. There was a little bit of a mistake of me not having the red underlined and the gray in italics, but notice anything underlined is new language. So replacing 7 with 4. Right, and anything in brackets is the parts where language is removed. The reason that last bracket at the end for when departmentalized instruction is offered in a foreign language in elementary school, the endorsement is valid for such instructions in grades 4, 5, and 6 is irrelevant now because everyone's goes down to 4, 5, and 6. Right. So Karen, if you could scroll down to 481. Right, 481, this is similar. So it is changing the grades from, it was 7 to 12, so now it's 4 through 12. In the last section, comprehensive special education, the grade range changed from kindergarten to 12 to pre-K 12.
Okay.
So, in which case, unless we have any further questions, I have a motion I'd like to make.
Go ahead.
All right, so I move that this document of regulations be passed forward to the Policy Committee for the State Board of Education with the amendments of removing 404A and allowing it to sunset, removing 412A4A, which was the students with disabilities, and I will come back with new language for that in the future. And then an amendment in 414A3B to change it to may participate in team. Or sorry, may participate in the beginning educator induction program.
Do we have a second?
Oh,
That's Margaret, second.
Well, wait, didn't you miss one, Kristen? You're going to change shall to may also with the 90-day?
Oh, that was in 414.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So do we have a second then? I think I heard Margaret say second.
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on that? All right, seeing none, we will move to a vote. Jen Rodriguez, yes. Dr. Ritchie? I think she's saying yes.
No, I said, I'm sorry, I'm too late. I was going to bring up discussion.
Oh, we have a second and we're in discussion. I started the vote, but I can always do my portion over again. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, Kristen, if you want help now and we can try to work as a group to adjust that small part of language regarding the special education. And then you don't, like, I'm not sure what you, I mean, you're going to like kind of do it and then move it forward. Do we have to look at that again? And if we do, maybe we can do it together now.
I think the motion was to bring it back to the regulations group for them to do the work and then bring it forward to the board, just that section.
Oh, I see. Okay. I misunderstood. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so we're going to go into the roll call vote for it. Jen Rodriguez, yes. Dr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Thank you. Kristen?
Yes.
Elsa?
Yes.
Tiffany?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Jenny?
Yes.
Margaret?
Yes.
Dr. Horton?
Yes.
Hamish?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
Patrice? Is that a yes? Okay. Dr. Rowe?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
And Cynthia?
Yes.
All right, the motion carries. Thank you all. Good conversation, good work. Looking forward to putting that on LPCD's next agenda. So thank you for that. And then I think we have initial to professional pathway regulation is the next one, which is C3. Karen, if you could bring that up.
Yes. And actually, Karen, if it's not a problem, I can do it from mine. That way I can click forward when I need to click forward.
Sure. Go right ahead, Kristen.
Oh, now my screen might not let me do it. Let's find out. It actually won't let me do it anymore. All right. Sorry, thought I was would make it easier.
All right, so if you could bring that up, C3, initial to professional pathway regulations. Just make it a little bit more magnified. Thank you.
Ah, okay. Sorry, one more thing. Karen, would you be able to do the C3 presentation part? Okay, because I have a proposal for the board, and in preparation of this proposal, I wrote 2 drafts of regulations. One in which, if we don't update the pathway to professional, we edit Regulation 417 to go based off what the law currently says. But the law currently gives our board a really unique authority in terms of being able to define a pathway to professional that goes beyond what the law already specifies. So if we have that presentation, yes. All right, and down at the bottom, there's like there's a button that looks like a projector screen. I don't know how to describe where it is. It's to the left of the minus button. So 1 bar up, that button.
Right there, yep.
Yes. And then we'll go in full screen mode. Okay. So, Karen, if you could give us 1 click. Okay. So, there's a little bit of history on this pathway to professional, especially in reading the regulations. You can see that there's like many layers of different requirements on how to get from provisional cert to professional cert, now initial cert to professional cert. Right. Prior to 2003, you could take 30 semester hours of credit beyond your bachelor's degree, and it could include graduate or undergraduate. Right. If you could give it a click. Then for a long period of time, it had to be 30 hours of graduate credit beyond the bachelor's degree. So it had to be graduate credit, not undergraduate credit, or you could complete a master's. Then in 2018, the law changed again. So 1 more click, and it now says we have to complete the master's. Back in the day, there were also these things called continuing education units. And the CEUs, these were used in order to keep people in their professional cert. So for instance, I've been on the professional cert for about 10 years. I would have need to be doing a certain number of CEUs every time that I went up to renew my professional certification. And that would require me to do ongoing professional development, ongoing training, ongoing coursework. So if Karen, if you give me, I think 2 clicks. Yes. So in pre-2012, teachers would have needed to take a certain number of CEUs in order to maintain their professional certificate. After 2012, that requirement for professional development was moved away from the individual teacher completing CEUs onto the Board of Education, who had to provide at least 18 hours of professional development to every certified staff member annually. Next. Okay, so now, in order to move to professional cert, if you could give me a few clicks. There we go. One of the things the legislature is really adamant about is that they think that the master's degree is a roadblock for current educators. That being said, they get to write the laws, so they were the ones who were able to put the master's degree as the requirement. But the reason that a lot of people think that master's degree is a roadblock is the master's degree requires a planned program of study, which requires admission into a program. It is a financial burden for educators, which I'll get into in a second. And it's also a huge time commitment in addition to work. Now, the timeline for completing the master's has changed. So now you have 10 years because your initial certification lasts 10 years. But these things are still a burden. So Karen, if you click forward. One concern that was, one back. One concern that was brought up specifically by one of the leaders of the Education Committee, well, this is so hard, was that because many of the master's programs are 092 programs, you know, a teacher in their initial certification would get their master's degree, which also gets them an 092. It puts them into a significant financial burden, especially if their district doesn't have like their tuition reimbursement. And this legislator was worried that the master's degree and the 092 specifically was encouraging educators to leave the classroom because they have this debt. Now they need to make more money. And it was pushing people to leave the classroom, what she thought of as prematurely. I do see that Lauren has a question.
Yeah, well, I just want to clarify, that's not accurate. So you cannot obtain an 092 with only a master's degree. You can't even become admitted into an 092 program without already holding a master's degree. The 092 programs are either 18 credits beyond a master's degree or a 6-year diploma. So there's no such thing as obtaining an 092 as a result of obtaining your master's degree.
Thanks for clarifying. When I was talking to this legislator in particular, she was worried that the master's degree was pushing people out of the profession because it pushed them along towards their 092.
I mean, that may or may not be the case. Somebody decides to go on for their 092 after they have their master's degree, but they cannot obtain it at the master's degree level. So like that slide just is not accurate.
Okay, thank you.
And also, I'm not quite sure where these tuitions come from, but that's not reflective of the state university system tuition in Connecticut for a 30 credit master's, because the state universities in Connecticut average about 15,000 a year, and masters are typically 30 credit. So I'm not quite sure where that public university dollar amount came from.
I have it cited right below. So I got that from the Digest of Education Statistics, and the costs from 1998 and 2018, those particular years. I adjusted those to 2025 dollars, so we were talking about all the same dollars. So I got it from the Digest of Education Statistics.
Yeah,
Right.
I just
but if you look
wanted
at the tuition pages, it's just not accurate for what Connecticut tuition costs.
It's not in our part of the state, Quinnipiac, Sacred Heart, Bridgeport, and Fairfield. We have a deal with the districts for the 5th-year master's degree or the post-bac master's. It's reduced tuition by almost 36%. And if you paid full tuition, if you didn't take that discount, you would only pay $30,000. Our grad students who do the district internship, they don't pay anything in tuition. So this is very misleading. You can go through our entire grad program and never pay a penny. 98% of our students do that. The only 2% who don't, for whatever reason, decide they don't want to work in a school for a year. It's very few people because their entire master's degree is paid for. Do you not get a bump in pay once you get your master's?
You do in some districts. So the getting a bump in pay depends on your teacher's contract. So some districts will have a bump at 30 credits beyond bachelor's. Some have it as master's. Some has it at, master's plus 30. Some have it at 60 credits beyond bachelor's. Each of the districts has its own collective bargaining agreement that says when they get a pay bump for, continuing coursework.
And similarly, reimbursement is very different district to district as well. All right, do you want to scroll forward past this one?
Sure.
Okay.
So when speaking with initial educators, and now initial educators is going to be a 10-year swath of teachers. So teachers within their first 10 years of teaching. Karen, if you give me I think it's 5 clicks. So these are going to be your initial educators within their first 10 years of teaching. Many of them are going to have different challenges than more established teachers. Someone in their, for instance, 5th-year teacher might have, 15th year teacher might no longer have student loan debts. I'm not completing team anymore. I've already earned tenure. you know, but for initial educators, they have a lot of these challenges ongoing. So on the certification end, when we're looking at like, how do we make a pathway to professional, we have to keep in mind that the first years of teaching are the most challenging. There's a reason people leave within the first 5 years, even if they've had the best preparation as we can give them, right? There's a lot of stresses on initial educators. And they'll be on the bachelor salary schedule. So when I was talking to legislators, one of the things they brought up about this board in particular is that we're supposed to be building streamlined, flexible pathways in the educator profession that are grounded in a commitment to educator effectiveness, right? And I have heard some criticism of the master saying that it's not effective in helping in student results and student data. I think that is misleading because let's say your master's program is in teacher leadership, or mine was teacher leadership and educational policy studies. I wasn't necessarily learning in my master's program to be a better classroom instructor. I was learning about educational policy. So I think it's kind of disingenuous to say that like the master's degree doesn't necessarily help student achievement, but we are supposed to be looking at pathways to professional that are working with educator effectiveness. So if you could click next. This is from the Public Act specifically, is that in the Public Act that created this board, one of our goals is supposed to be creating a system to help educators continuously improve their practice and support and reward educators who demonstrate mastery. To your point and Jenny's point in the chat, there is in teacher contracts, some reward for mastery in which like when you have a bachelor's degree and you move to a master's in New Haven, they get a pay bump of about $2,000 a year. But is the certification system, one back, rewarding teachers for showing mastery, right? The third part of the Public Act that I wanted to bring up was that the board's supposed to be moving towards treating educators and as professionals and lifelong learners who need access to high quality professional learning and mentorships throughout their careers. So with all that being said, in the Public Act, it gives us this flexibility, which is really interesting. So what this is saying, in order to move from initial or provisional, because some people still hold provisional, in order to move to professional, C requires that either the person holds a master's degree or higher in an appropriate subject area, or complete an alternate pathway to professional jointly approved by the State Board of Education and our certification board. So when I was speaking to this legislator, she was wondering, like, what is the alternate pathway our board is going to be putting forward? The alternate pathway that ultimately has to get approved by both us and SBE, the State Board of Education. One thing I did ask about to our lawyer is that this pathway, does it need to go back as a legislative amendment? And her answer was no, because the law gives us and the SBE joint authority to approve a pathway. Whatever pathway the SBE and the CEPCB jointly agree to would become the alternate pathway to professional. So with all that being said, Karen, if you can give me a click. All right. So the beginning part of this, this is laid out in law. So current pathway to professional is complete 5 years, 50 months of service, complete team, the beginning educator induction program. It currently says with one click, it currently says hold a master's degree or higher in an appropriate subject area. But an alternative pathway that I'd like to propose is to have an equivalent number of hours in professional development or higher education called micro-credentials. Now, some discussion was had about like, should we still call it CEUs, continuing education unit, which is a, being able to take these professional developments and earning professional development hours in terms of CEUs. The reason I didn't want to use the word CEUs is because in previous years, CEUs were required as a continuation. In order, once you have your professional, you continue to be certified by earning CEUs, right? But Karen, if you can give me another click. There we go. But in terms of coursework, if I'm completing the equivalent of 30 graduate credits, could we do it piecemeal? Could we do it as hours of getting additional coursework and be able to count credits for things that teachers feel are really indicative of like what their classroom needs, that are more flexible than a planned program, that do include graduate credits? Right? So the way I came up with the 450 hours is one graduate credit is 15 hours of classwork plus or minus some. So if you had a 3-credit graduate course, that would become 45 hours of micro-credentials. 450 hours would be the equivalent of 30 graduate class hours, or 30 graduate credits. There we go. So 450 micro-credentials would be the equivalent of 30 graduate credits. Some of the things that I think were really interesting if we choose to pursue this pathway is that, Karen, give me like 4 clicks. Perfect. Is that it would give more flexible options for educators. So this would allow teachers to be able to use courses offered at RESCs, for instance. This would allow them to do courses that were not part of a planned program. So for instance, I actually had my computer science teacher from high school just took this course for 3 graduate credits, which would be about 3 graduate credits that was offered through San Diego State University and was a course taught by a professor, has grades for this course, but it wasn't part of a planned program of study. The course was like how to use AI to help teach computer science, right? Having more flexible options for educators would let teachers pick what coursework would actually help them in their profession, especially when these are teachers that are working towards their annual goals for their teacher evaluation. This year, I might want to take a course that's more along the lines of, a math instruction course, which is not my background, but it would help me be a better physics teacher. So the options could be more flexible with micro-credentialing than just a planned program and a master's degree. It could allow them to identify coursework that is most effective for their classrooms. And it kind of does what the legislation suggested, encourage lifelong learning. Instead of, just rushing to get a master's degree for the pay bump, right? Being able to choose coursework that's outside a planned program of study and over the course of their 10 years as initial educators would allow people to pick which programming, which coursework actually will help them reach students. Now, for the high quality professional development with the SDE support, one of the challenges in thinking of this pathway is like, okay, so could you just take any online course? And I think this is where we can leverage existing language in the regulations about CEUs. So if you give me another click. When CEUs were required, this actually had SDE staff doing some oversight of where CEUs came from. There were certain institutions, there were certain boards of educations, there were RESCs, for instance, that were CEU providers because they met the administrative criteria. So Karen, give me like a few clicks here. I think it's 6. So in the past, in the system that we already had for CEUs, the State Department of Ed was able to check that a provider of CEUs did the following 6 things. We don't want it to just be, I took an online course and, with no oversight. So the SDE in the past was required to check in with CEU providers to make sure that they had staff to administer and coordinate an organized schedule of programs, that the staff was responsible for ensuring administrative and program criteria were being followed, provide certificates, transcripts, grades, or other evidence to the department when necessary, maintaining an attendance system, a permanent record of those micro-credentials or previously CEUs, and syllabi for the course. So if you took a course on diversity, equity, inclusion in 2025 and you go up for your professional certification in 2031, then this would need to be kept track of. And finally, providing appropriate educational facilities, reference materials, equipment, as well as like access to libraries was under there. So Elsa says in the chat, before, my district allowed you to take education classes online or in person based on your interest or content area. Now I believe they made it stricter if you want to have your pay bump. Now you would have to get your program approved before participating in a program. Yes, and Elsa, I think that's an important note for administrators, right? If you're an administrator being like, oh no, do I need to count some online credits? Your district's collective bargaining agreement can still say what are the requirements in order to get the pay bump at master's degree or however that works. So in Elsa's case, her district was saying now you have to get the program approved before participating in a program. And this requirement from the state end wouldn't supersede the district's right to collectively bargain with their employees. So if your collective bargaining agreement, for instance, in Glastonbury, ours does say our coursework has to get approved in advance, my supervisor might approve the math course that I want to take, right? In order for it to count towards my master's, but then the state would be able to count it either way if it meant the criteria for micro-credential. And Caitlin.
I just want to say that, prior to July 1, 2012, we had staff, like a whole unit that was completely dedicated to this. That has completely been disbanded. So if we were to put something like this back into place, we would literally need to hire like a whole new office full of people. So then there would have to be money from the General Assembly dedicating to us creating like an entire new office for CEUs. I just want to throw that out there. Like while this sounds like really like a lot of potential, there would be a lot of work behind putting something like this in place, minimum maybe 2 years before we'd be up in the ground, because we would have to go back to approving providers. We would have to be in line with what our districts have been doing for the last 13 years. Our districts have coordinated their own and have managed it in-house. Prior to that, we used to audit educators. Like it's just a completely different landscape now. So I just want to say that in caution, where if something like this were to go through, it would be a great deal of planning to make it come through and additional staff, significant amount.
Yes. Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah,
Oh,
no, I
sorry,
just want
if I
I just
could
want to echo everything that Kaylin just said. My understanding, I wasn't here in 2012, but there was like essentially multiple staff members, because you would have to have a whole approval process. And I know you took some of the regulations that used to speak to CEUs and changed the word to micro-credential, but there'd be a whole approval process for those entities. Also, the hour requirement would have to be codified in some kind of meaningful way because all kinds of organizations call micro-credentials like very different things. Some, it's sort of like a 15-hour course equals 1 micro-credential, but the language of that is hours. But most importantly, you would need significant financial, like you'd have to essentially create another department within the talent office that governed approving entities, storing the data, you'd need an infrastructure system for how educators were providing this micro-credential information, because you could see a scenario where they might have attended 27 different things. If you're talking about 450 hours, you need a way to collect that, monitor it. It would be a very costly endeavor. Not to say that it's not worthwhile, but I don't think you can think about language to this effect without the practical implications. I know the deputy commissioner, is on the call, and she probably has some thoughts, because she has like the broad sense of, the fiscal nature of what's happening with CSDE. But I think that's really couldn't be more, sort of emphasized, the implications on the practical side.
I just want to jump into Lauren. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sorry, go ahead, Deputy Commissioner. I was just going to talk about
Yeah, I
data.
was just going to say kudos to both what Lauren and Kaylin have addressed. I think from a CSDE perspective, not having the infrastructure currently in place to support that is huge. But the big piece is the financial piece of that. But I'm also thinking about the district perspective, and I sit on other councils for mandates and things where we don't have a uniformed way in how some of this is captured or kept record of. I'm thinking from a district perspective, yes, there is contract language that speaks specifically to how, some of this is done, and, the background information that's looked on before a district approves it. We also have to think about the capacity that districts may or may not even have, and also overseeing, whether they're overseeing it directly or not, the impact it would have as well. So I also think about it from a district perspective as well, when we're thinking about these things. I just don't want to add like another burden or something that the districts would also we would have to think about that as well. So it's a uniform way in how they're looking at it.
Thank you. Hamish?
Yeah, I was wondering if it helps to like split the conversation in two pieces. One is like the CEU or micro-credential piece of it, and then the other piece of it is like, all right, if we're building an alternative or pathway, which I commend for actually, even regardless of the the data that you provided and the accuracy thereof, I think the conclusion is actually similar to the way I see it, which is, what are you trying to incentive? What if it's in some levels a compliance related task of trying to go from initial to professional, which a lot of educators, that's frankly, if you want to keep your job, you need to eventually get there, right? What are we looking to do in that movement, right? We're looking to have some level of additional understanding of your work, increased effectiveness, increased opportunities to both formally and informally mentor and engage in the profession, what it might be. And then it comes to the national board certification piece of it, which I think is actually interesting, and other states do that as well, as a way to, I think, evaluate some of those same ideas, right? And the same thoroughness, similar thoroughness, I think.